This is my presentation on artistic activism. So we'll be starting off with Banksy. Banksy is a street artist whose identity remains unknown to this day. Banksy is believed to be born in Bristol, which is in England, around the 1970s and rose to prominence because of their very provocative and controversial pieces in the late 1990s. You'll see political themes. You'll see Banksy satirically critiquing war, capitalism, greed, and a lot of common images in Banksy pieces are rats, apes, policemen, and members of the royal family. All the pictures I've included in this slide are some of my favorite works by Banksy, notably the image on the top left, which is a police frisking a Basquiat-like figure. We'll be talking about Basquiat later in this presentation, but the social commentary that this picture provides on the top left is how poorly the police treat street/graffiti artists, which was something that Basquiat was very well known for. But you can also infer that this could be a depiction on police brutality inflicted toward people of color, since Basquiat was a black man of Haitian and Puerto Rican descent. The featured piece that we'll be talking about today is entitled Love is in the Air. This is a Banksy piece, and this work was first seen in Jerusalem in 2003 in the West Bank barrier. This depicted quote-unquote thug is seen throwing a bouquet of flowers in place of whatever weapon you can think of. This is one of the many artworks that Banksy has put out in favor of Palestine and Palestinian rights. In the United Declaration of Human Rights, Article 15 states that 1. Everyone has the right to nationality, and 2. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. So, what does this have to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Well, if the United Declaration of Human Rights lists nationality as a right, what happens in the absence of nationality? And that's when we talk about statelessness. In this next slide, I've included a picture of the West Bank barrier circa 2002, which was at the height of the Palestinian Second Uprising. And so when we talk about statelessness in itself is the absence of nationality and the sense of belonging to a nation. I've included this image to show the increasing Jewish occupation of Palestine over the years. As you can see, the UN plan of 1947 called for a partition of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. You can see as the years have gone by that Israel has continued to grow. With increasing Jewish occupation, you can see that a lot of the Palestinian states are decreasing. So what does that mean for Palestinians that occupied which was once a Palestinian state, but is now an Israeli state? Well, a lot of these Palestinians are displaced. The second largest group of refugees is made up of those Palestinians who were displaced for the first time from their homes and communities, as well as their descendants. There are approximately 1 million Palestinian refugees from 1967. The next artist we'll be talking about is Ai Weiwei. Now, Ai Weiwei is a Chinese contemporary artist as well as an activist. Ai Weiwei grew up in China where he lived under very harsh and negative conditions due to his father's exile. He's been openly critical of the Chinese government's stance on democracy and human rights, which has gotten him into a lot of trouble, needless to say. This piece is entitled Remembering. So, I don't know if you can see, but there are a bunch of backpacks that are strung along and in different colors in this piece, which is a dedication to the thousands of lives that were lost during the 2009 Sichuan earthquake. Many of those that did pass were children and young students. According to Ai Weiwei, this piece was not only a dedication to those lives that were lost, but about how Chinese society, with censorship and control, individuals can still take action and defend their rights. Ai Weiwei was actually jailed for this piece. In Article 19 of the United Declaration of Human Rights, it says that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. So, this article actually ties in with this piece perfectly because when the earthquake did happen, there was a lot of censorship on China's part of the people that were affected, and a lot of those names of those children that passed were kind of just forgotten about, and it was just handled very poorly overall. So when Ai Weiwei spoke out against this in this piece, that was infuriating to the Chinese government, which in turn put him in prison because of it. So China was involved in both the drafting of the UN Charter and the UDHR. However, China believes that human rights have to do with cultural norms, or just they're related to cultural norms in general. So it's not a universal idea. In this first image, you'll see some protesters protesting the Xinhua News Agency, which is one of the largest news agencies in China. The Xinhua News Agency is very notorious for their censorship and disinformation that they put out. A lot of people believe that the Xinhua News Agency is actually just a big platform of propaganda for the Chinese government because the news they put out isn't even reliable or factual. Second image I've included is of Brad Pitt, which seems kind of random, but plays into China's censorship and overall distaste for Western media. So Brad Pitt was actually banned from China in 1997 due to his role in the movie 7 Years in Tibet. The Chinese didn't like how the occupation of Tibet was portrayed in the film. So in retaliation, they banned the movie as well as Brad Pitt from China. The next artist we'll be speaking about is Miss Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo was a Mexican painter known for her many portraits and works inspired by the nature and artifacts of Mexico. She was inspired by the country's popular culture, and she employed a naive folk art style to explore the questions of identity, post-colonialism, gender, class, and race in Mexican society. So Frida was actually a victim of polio at age 6. Polio left her right leg thinner than her left, which Frida actually disguised by wearing very long skirts. She also suffered from spina bifida, a congenital disease that affected both spinal and leg development. If that wasn't enough trauma, Frida was also involved in a serious bus accident, which left her with a broken spinal column, a broken collarbone, broken ribs, and a broken pelvis. In addition, her right foot was dislocated and crushed, and her shoulder was out of joint. So we'll be talking about her self-portrait with a portrait of Dr. Farrell. I included this direct quote because I feel like it definitely encompassed her art style and just herself in general. The quote reads, "I paint myself because I am so often alone and because I am the subject I know best." You'll see that in a lot of Frida's artwork, she very openly depicts her disabilities. Accommodations for disabled persons in the 40s and 50s in the US, let alone Mexico, were practically non existent. Article 25 states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or the lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Frida was a very successful artist, as well as being born into a middle-class family. so she was able to receive help and accommodations for the most part. However, for people who weren't as well off as Frida in this time period, resources and help were practically non-existent and very difficult to come by. So our next featured artist is Mr. Jean-Michel Basquiat. Basquiat was an American artist who was of both Haitian and Puerto Rican descent. Basquiat was part of Samo, which was a graffiti duo who wrote epigrams in the cultural hotbed of the Lower East Side of Manhattan during the 1970s. By the 80s, his paintings were in exhibits and galleries all over the globe. Basquiat spoke on a lot of different issues, such as wealth versus poverty and integration versus segregation, as well as social commentaries on the behalf of the Black community in the 70s and 80s. In this piece by Basquiat, this is one of his most popular pieces, actually. It speaks on the white male oppressive policing system. As a Black man growing up in New York, Basquiat believed that African Americans were subjected to the dominance and control of a white male oppressive policing system. At the very core of this painting is the statement that the system is flawed. He also questions why other Black individuals would work for a police state that works against them. Both Article 2 and 7 tie into this piece. Article 2 states that everyone is entitled to the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any limitation of sovereignty. Article 7 states that all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in the violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. The next slide includes some statistics, national statistics, on police brutality in the United States. I've included a picture of some members of the Black Panther movement, which was at its peak during Basquiat's time. And last but not least, we have Max Ernst. Max Ernst was born in a place near Cologne, Germany, called Brühl. He was raised in a very strict religious Catholic family, and his parents were disciplinarians. Although his father was deaf, he adored his father and learned so much from him, particularly when it comes to painting. His father was a teacher who introduced Max into painting at a very young age. This famous piece by Ernst is called Europe After the Rain. Now, during World War I, Ernst was forced to join the German army, which exposed them to a lot of the trauma that is warfare. After serving his time in the army, he left with a lot of disdain for Western culture. Ernst was deeply affected by Nazi politics in Germany, and Europe After the Rain depicts that. It's a surrealistic landscape of the dystopian Europe after the destruction and just chaos that happened during the Second World War. Articles 2 and 5 tie into this piece. Article 2 states that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. We spoke about this article in Basquiat's piece as well. Article 5 states that no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. These are all things that affected the Jewish citizens during World War II in Europe. Now, the United Declaration of Human Rights was created in response to World War II. So a lot of the horrors that happened in this war and a lot of the violent crimes that were inflicted upon citizens were so great and so monumentous that we came up with this document. Of course, there is a quote unquote natural human law that was kind of universally understood. However, we finally put it on paper after everything that had happened during World War II. So, in conclusion, what all of these pieces and all of these artists have in common is that human rights are very important, and we are constantly fighting for these rights till this day. Just because we do have a document listing all these rights doesn't mean that these rights are followed through with or are continuously given to people. Art has always been an important medium for social commentary and will continue to be an important medium for social commentary in years to come.